everybody. Welcome back to the Standing Light podcast. I am your host, Leyla Salvade, and I am so excited for today's guest, who has become a very dear friend of mine, and I feel honored to shine a light on you today in the Standing Light podcast. Bruce Cryer, welcome.
Thank you, Leyla. Good to be here.
So just a brief little introduction about you, and I'll let you go into all the magic and things that you're up to right now as well. But you were the former CEO of HeartMath for 11 years. Basically, we're part in the whole co-creation from the very beginning, from the very start. And we, funnily enough, met during the first lockdown in 2020, April 2020, I believe it was, on an online conference where we both were invited to share resilience tools, and I was invited to share the Standing Light method. I had no idea that you were on the call. I didn't even know who you were, unfortunately, yet. And it was so incredible because here I was, having taken the work that I learned at HeartMath a little bit further into the more energetic space, and not even realizing that you were on the call, and then having you experience the Standing Light method, and the feedback that you shared with me was so affirmative and moving. And I still am just so grateful for that moment and for the path of the heart merging us together. And we've gone on to actually create even a little course on the heart, which we'll be sharing as well. And I'm just so grateful for you and for your work in bringing the power and the intelligence of the heart into our collective consciousness. So welcome. And we are going to go super geeky today. So put on your seatbelt and get ready to have your mind blown and come into the power of the heart. And for all of those more logical and analytical people, I think this will be a very helpful podcast and conversation, because it will really shed light on a lot of what I talk about, but really bring the science into it as well. So welcome, Bruce.
Sounds good to me. I like geeky and I like deep. So I think we'll be deep and geeky.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be able to geek out on this topic with somebody, because I feel like a loner a lot of the times, and I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into it. I would love to hear a very simple explanation from Bruce on how you describe what heart intelligence is.
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it's a term that HeartMath itself began exploring nearly 30 years ago now. And I think I first heard it from the wonderful, wonderful man, author, Joseph Chilton Pearce, who had been talking about heart intelligence for some time when I heard him say it in 1992 or whenever that was. But I think throughout civilization, there are so many examples in the Bible, 1,000 references to the heart, not as just some fantastic machine, but as a source of courage, intelligence. The famous biblical passage, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I learned early on in HeartMath years that in the Chinese language, the ancient Chinese language, the symbol for think had the image, the pictograph for heart connected to a pictograph of brain with these silk threads between the two. This was in the original, like thousands of years ago, pictogram. And so the concept understood 5,000 years ago was that to think required the heart and the brain together in a level of harmony. So the idea of the heart being a source of intelligence is sort of universal, and many cultures. It's not just Chinese or at all. Many cultures have revered the heart. The idea of it being intelligent is a little more specific, right? It's one thing to say the heart is where you get your courage. It's where, why you tell your kids, just sing from your heart. You'll be great. Just don't be nervous. Just speak from your heart and everybody's going to love it. So we have this innate collective wisdom that the heart's powerful,
Mhm.
and it's got some qualities that are not just because it's a pump. This is not just speak from your pump. That's not what we're saying. No, go ahead, go back out there on the soccer pitch and just play with your pump. No, that's not what we're saying. So the intelligence of the heart in modern times, almost 30 years ago now, um, researchers in a number of places, but one of the primary ones was in Canada, in Quebec, discovered a sophisticated neurological network. So neurons, what are called sensory neurites, processing information together in the human heart. So this wasn't like, oh, this guy's got this processing. No, like everybody has this. So do dogs, so do other mammals. But it was like a mind-shattering kind of realization that what are you talking about? The heart literally has neurons that are processing information, and the answer was yes. And in fact, a whole field of study began called neurocardiology to study the intrinsic nervous system found in every human heart. And that nervous system is processing information all the time and sending that information north to the brain. And of course, many people have heard of also the gut brain, also known as the enteric brain. So that massive neurological network that also functions as a brain. So now more and more we talk about three brains, the one up here that gets all the credit, the one down in the gut, which we know intuitively, like there's something going on there. A lot of people are more comfortable saying, I trust my gut than even
Or
saying, I trust my
instinct.
heart.
Yeah.
Or instinct, yeah. And now we're saying, science is saying, and guess what? There's another one in the heart. And so heart intelligence is a literal scientific concept now, as well as it having been metaphorical for thousands of years
Mhm.
before we could prove absolutely that, well, there's a wisdom to calling the heart intelligent, because actually there are tens of thousands of neurons in there that do process information and do guide not only the functioning of the heart but the whole body.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's heart intelligence is a real thing.
It reminds me of the quote by Aristotle, which goes, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all.
Mm. Exactly. I mean, I think one of the things with having been there, as you mentioned, since the beginning of HeartMath, and part of our mission in the early days was to help shift this complete, utter fascination with the mind and
Mhm.
believing that the mind was
All
the king of
powerful.
everything, all powerful, into realizing, actually,
The heart is.
there's this other guy. He's a good guy, but we got this other guy. And pardon the male sounding references, but you know what I'm saying. I'm from Jersey, so I have to sound like it every now and then. But no, it's a joint venture, and that part of what's wrong with society in large part is that we get stuck in the head with our opinions and our judgments and our beliefs, and cannot tap into that innate intelligence, let alone that care, that compassion, that gratitude, that forgiveness that we all collectively associate with the heart,
Virtues of the
whether
heart.
science, the virtues of the heart, exactly. So, and it was kind of our mission from the beginning to help people realize you need a joint venture. It's not about getting rid of the head. Good luck living without a head.
Right.
Good luck making good decisions without a mind and to analyze, and that's all super important.
Mhm.
But if living only from that part of our intelligence, if we tried that, well, everybody is. I mean, a lot of people are. So
Right.
not
Well,
exactly
welcome
pleading
to
to.
our situation. That's precisely what has
Exactly.
led us to where we are now, which is not a good situation. Right. And I mean, this is a huge reason why I also started this podcast, because I haven't even shared this with you yet. But so the mission of Standing Light in and of itself, but the podcast is to have heart-to-heart conversations to inspire the shift from a mind-based mentality to a heart-empowered reality.
Beautiful.
And
Yes, 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 yes.
yes,
And
and
that's
more
a
people.
beautiful way to put it, because it's one thing when you're, again, we all need our mind. We all have mindsets. I mean, that's an important part of our growth is
Right.
what is our mindset, what's happening in our mind that's guiding our actions.
Yeah.
But the way you're phrasing it, heart empowered,
Mhm.
you still need the mind.
Mhm.
You got to have the mind, but what kind of fuel are you going to give the mind? Are you going to give the mind unmanaged emotional fuel? How's that going to work for you? Or are
Right.
you going to give it the highest quality fuel, i.e. love, that you
Yeah.
possibly can? So then the mind, and this has been part of the joy of some of the HeartMath research over the years, is all the studies that we and others conducted that showed that the more you can live in a more positive emotional state, whether that means you're more hopeful, more optimistic, more joyful, more compassionate, cognitive benefits abound. It
Yeah.
turns out short-term memory is improved.
Mhm.
Why would that be? You're not living in all those stressful emotions so much. That might be why. When we're in stressful emotions all the time, how great's your short-term memory? You're constantly distracted by the stuff that's angering you or worrying you, frustrating you.
Mhm.
So, so the idea of the heart empowering of the mind is really a beautiful way to think of it
Mhm.
because we need our minds,
Right.
and the mind is a beautiful thing and capable of guiding a fabulous future for ourselves.
Mhm.
But if it's not powered by the heart,
Mhm.
it'll still get a future for ourselves, but it may not be a sustainable future or
Yeah.
one that's really full of love and joy and togetherness and
But
support and
what
connection.
we actually want, what the heart actually wants, right?
Exactly.
And we're talking about the contracted state of the heart, right? Like when we are in those lower vibrational emotions like fear, shame, guilt, and that has been proven to contract the electromagnetic field of the heart. So I would love to also have you talk about that because I've shined a light a little bit on it in the first podcast, but I'd love to hear from you, how people can come to understand the power of their thoughts and emotions having a direct effect on their electromagnetic field of the heart and just how powerful the heart actually is with its 5,000 times more powerful magnetically. And so share a little bit about that and help illuminate the minds of our listeners in this regard.
Sure. Well, first of all, sort of some basic physics. So any living thing produces electromagnetic energy. That's just thing
Including some celestial bodies even, right? Like the sun, the earth.
everywhere. It's all electromagnetic frequencies.
Right.
Everything that we experience, light, sound, is all part of the
Mhm.
electromagnetic spectrum, which is
Mhm.
everything,
Right.
basically. So yeah. So that's number one. So when we talk about the heart producing electromagnetic energy, that can sound weird to people. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, all living things do that. Right,
Mhm.
exactly. They all do. Now, the heart happens to be the most powerful generator in the body by far. So we know, for example, when researchers 30 years ago were looking at how powerful the heart was in the amplitude of the electrical signal uh, produced by the heart, also known as the electrocardiogram, very common EKG or ECG, that signal, it turns out, is around 40 to 60 times stronger than the electrical signal produced by the brain. So we have all these techniques and technologies trying to help us learn how to manage our brain waves, which is the electricity generated by the heart in different there's alpha, there's beta, there's theta, delta, gamma. There's all these different frequencies that the brain's producing, but all that's within the electrical spectrum of what the brain can do. And then we come back down here to the heart, and it's producing an electrical signal 40 to 60 times stronger than what the brain's producing. Wouldn't we want to manage that one? Great. Let's learn how to manage all that stuff. But as I often have said, when was the last time you felt a brainwave? Second question, when was the last time you felt your heart? This morning when I was crossing the street and that car was coming awfully fast. Suddenly I felt a panic and I felt my heart race. So you feel your heart all the time, let alone I was driving for days recently and listening to an album I hadn't heard in over 30 years. And my heart was just exploding in joy and love
Mhm.
because that album was associated with the birth of my daughter. And I
Mhm.
was hearing songs I hadn't listened to in 35 years. And I was just reliving all those original feelings of love for my daughter before she was even born. Some songs had connected me to her soul before she was even born, and I was reliving them while I was driving. And that was my heart that was going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, my mind was all over the place too, having fun with all that, but my body, my heart was where I was like, "Oh, thank you. Oh my God, this is so amazing. I'm experiencing this again right now in this moment in time."
Mm-hmm.
The heart.
And
So,
let me add that as you're speaking about this, right, you're fully heart-centered because you're feeling and tuning back into that moment and experience. And I can only imagine some of the audience, our hearts start to, we can feel it as well, or I could just feel you right now in my heart, right? Which you'll go deeper into as well of that science, but
exactly.
it's just
Yeah.
magical,
Exactly. Yeah. So where this gets very interesting, so obviously even just within the body, it turns out this electromagnetic power that the heart possesses is it's innate. It's the electrical and magnetic generator for the body. The brain's more like a substation, if you want to look at it in those terms. Like this is the main power plant electrically and magnetically. Brain's like a substation, a very important substation, not to be dismissed, but a substation. But as is true with all electromagnetic energy, it's not just living in the entity where it's born, like the heart. I mean, you could be near an electrical outlet, and you could pick up with technically with certain devices the electrical energy emanating from those wires. It's
right?
not just in the wires. A field is being created around electrical wires. You drive under strong transformers. Back in the days when we used to listen to radios, the radios would go fuzzy
Mm.
because the frequency of the power lines was so powerful. The field created by those power lines, it would interfere with the radio frequencies in your car, and you'd like, let's get out from under those transmitters as quick as possible. So we understand that in science, out in life, electrical magnetic fields are created, and they're potent things.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, the Earth, the sun, and all stars are producing them at levels beyond our imagination. So one of the things we learned early on with the heart and the brain is that while the heart is this main power plant, this electrical signal that goes to every cell in your body, which is the reason you could pick up your heartbeat on your big toe or on your earlobe or anywhere in your body, no problem, because it's such a powerful rhythm and electrical signal that's being coursed through your body every second you're alive. You can't pick up your brain waves everywhere. In fact, to even measure brain waves, you got to have all these different electrodes, and they got to filter out the heartbeat because the heartbeat's so much more powerful than what's being detected up there. That less powerful doesn't mean less important, of course. So the brain waves are super important. What all is going on up there? But there's this boom, boom, powerhouse going on down here all the while. So, but what we learned through modern day technology and measuring devices was that when the heart's just doing its thing, an electromagnetic field is being created. That's what that's what happens when electricity is being generated, and that field is not stopped by the skin. So the field goes out into space. Now, how far it goes out into space is a great question. Current technology can measure it several feet outside the body. How far it's actually going, you just felt something when I was talking about my daughter. How did you feel it?
Exactly.
How did I feel it as I was sitting there listening to Anita Baker? It was the Anita Baker album called Sweet Love and Rapture. And what was I feeling of an album she had recorded 36 years earlier?
Mm.
So these energies clearly can go places. They're
Mm-hmm.
not limited to where we may feel them ourselves.
Right.
So when we heard that you could easily measure the heartbeat of a person several feet away from their body, like it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then in our research at HeartMath in the early years, we were also trying to draw a direct correlation between our changing emotional states especially stressful ones,
Mhm.
and looking at what does that do to the heart when we're really anxious or frustrated or angry. What do the patterns look like in the heart? Turns out they look a lot like an earthquake. Interesting. Well, what do the heartbeat patterns look like when we're loving, when we're feeling happy, peaceful, joyful, having fun? The heart patterns look like a sine wave instead of
Mhm.
an earthquake.
Mhm.
And heart, that's a famous graphic that HeartMath produced back in, I think, 93, maybe long, long time ago. And so then now transpose that to the space, not just in your body, where your heart's either producing a chaotic rhythm because you're pissed off or frustrated or stressed out, or this beautiful sine wave because you're happy, you're feeling at peace, you're feeling in love, whatever. And what about the space outside of you? Since we already knew, science had already figured out, you can measure the heartbeat several feet away. Well, that heartbeat is carrying information, as we all know. And if you're just in the presence of somebody who's clearly irritated, you feel it. How do you not feel it? Or the opposite, you feel in the presence of someone very kind and or very loving, or just like, oh, I don't even know who you are, but it just feels good to be with you, you know, because we feel that. So part of what HeartMath was kind of putting together in these various pieces was positive emotion is very much tied to what our heart is doing. It's the heart is sending the signal into space 24/7.
Yeah.
Why not put it out into space, i.e., out to other people who
Right.
we care about or total strangers in an airport, whatever, the highest quality signal, if you want to talk physics, or the highest vibe, emotion, feeling that we possibly can, knowing that it's going out anyway.
Gonna
So
emanate.
whatever you put out, it's going out, it's emanating. So why not put out the most wonderful feeling that you can for the sense of the field around you, whoever may be in it, or no one, let
And
alone for the
you.
sake of you,
Yeah.
for you, and what that means for you in terms of your hormones, your biochemistry, your all the things that make you uniquely you,
Mhm.
is getting bathed in the highest quality energy in the universe, love. So, that sounds like a smart move.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about the intuitive faculty of the heart, because there's quite a few things I want to touch on in regards to this. There's a study that HeartMath did where they hooked people up and were showing different images, which basically, and you'll share about it in a second, but I always felt deeply connected with my heart, my soul, my intuition. I had intuition on demand, like Greg Braden coined. And then at some point it was cut off, due to bullying and whatnot and being made wrong at 6 years old. And then I shut it off and I made it wrong, which so many of us do, right? I mean, so many of us have that deep connection to our intuition, with our intuition. And it's a very extremely intelligent source of intelligence. But for whatever reason, it's been made wrong. It's been made kind of woo-woo and we don't have to go into those conspiracy theories, but there's why would we make something so powerful and so intelligent wrong? And then ultimately that causes us to not trust ourselves anymore. So then we've got a whole world that is not aware of the power of their heart, not aware of how powerful their hearts can actually influence how they're feeling and their health and well-being. But then also there's a complete lack of trust in oneself because we've been made wrong for this intuitive notion within us. I would love to talk about that a little bit as well.
Well, you mentioned the study, and every time somebody mentions this particular study, I smile because I was one of the subjects,
No
and
way. Okay.
I vividly remember what it was like to be in the study.
Tell us.
And basically, imagine being super hooked up to technology. I mean, like the ultimate biohacker. There was a skull cap measuring all kinds of brain waves. My fingers were measuring oxygen. There was heart rate variability to 24-hour Holter monitor on me. I think there was GSR being measured. It was a lot being measured all at the same time. And I was one of many subjects. This was I don't remember how large the study I just focused on my job, which was to sit in front of a computer and hit a button whenever I felt like it. And about 6 seconds later, an image was being randomly generated and would show up on the screen of the computer in front of me. And you had no idea what was going to happen next. And these were all very vivid images. So the first image could be the most spectacular daisy you had ever seen on a sunny day with the Alps in the background. It would just be, oh my God. And then that would go away. And then when you were ready, you would push the button again, at which point a random image would be generated. And the next image could be somebody being killed with a knife, and like extremely graphic. And then the time goes on, you hit the button again, and then the next image could be this sweetest little baby with her mother, and just like, oh. And then the next image could be smokestacks and cars and smog, and then the next image could be an extremely graphic of two people making love. And then the next thing, it was like you had no idea what was coming next. And sometimes you had to kind of recover from what you just saw, because these were they were extremely graphic in negative ways, or even in romantic. It was just it was a bit of a roller coaster of emotions,
My
frankly,
goodness.
to go through it. And being I think I'm an HSP, or even if I'm not, I was that day. Like, wow, this is wild.
Hypersensitive
So
person,
yes,
for those
so
that don't
I
know
think.
HSP.
Yeah, so thank you. Um, so what was fascinating about as they started to look at all the data later on, and this particular study was building on some research that had been done at, I believe, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, um, where they had looked at the brain's ability to precognitively anticipate a future event through a similar setup, but they hadn't looked at the heart. They'd only looked at the brain.
Wow.
And they'd been able to determine that the brain did, in some cases, anticipate what the next image was going to be, even though the computer hadn't even selected it yet. Well, how is that possible? In our study, sure enough, the heart was detecting not in every single case with every single person, but a high percentage of the time, the heart was predicting in advance of you even pressing the button, let alone the image appearing on the screen, what was going to be the feeling of that next image several seconds before it showed up on the screen. So the heart was and how did we know that? How did the researchers at HeartMath know that? Because of the kind of pattern the heart was in. If it's smooth, it's happy. If it's chaotic, it could be worried, it could be angry, it could be frustrated, it could be any kind. So depending on the type of pattern, that's how they knew what it was already sensing somehow without us. I wasn't consciously thinking, oh, here comes violence. There was no thought at all in my head, but my body, and as was the case with others, was registering it. And it turns out the brain also was, but it was after the heart.
Right.
So it appeared from the research that the heart was kind of getting the signal first.
Mhm.
Then the brain was like the video screen
Mhm.
saying, yep, got it. So it didn't appear that the brain was registering the signal, the sensation first. It was being registered in the heart first, but then the heart needed the brain to kind of codify it or keep track of it or whatever. So that was a pretty stunning study, because again, it's kind of confirmed what an awful lot of us have felt intuitively. Intuitively, I use that word, right? For a long time, that there is this intelligence going on with the heart, and it defies linear thinking, and it often goes completely against what our left brain wants to think about a certain situation, and so it drives you crazy because it's like completely counterintuitive. We use that word, don't we?
Right.
Counterintuitive, meaning it doesn't seem to make logical sense when in fact it was highly intuitive
Mhm.
and made ultimate sense.
Yes.
That we would be so sensitive as that we could pick up things in advance. There is a field of possibility. It's possible that we could, and maybe this didn't get covered in the HeartMath study per se, but maybe in that registration, that's part of influencing the future event. I mean, that's a Joe Dispenza kind of concept, isn't it? That
Well, yes.
Dr. Joe, that to create the future, we need to be in the future. We need to live the emotions of the future, and then we start to pull the future toward us, because
Mhm.
the future, just like everything, is a series of unknowns, and crystallizing possibilities that
Right.
may or may not occur depending upon kind of what we're drawing and what we're putting out there. So it's all very fun to think of, but I think back to kind of bottom line for everybody is in the modern days, and I think especially challenging in these last few years, where there's been so many things to worry about, and you feel like you can't catch a breath, let alone catch a break. And that's a pretty good phrase. You can't catch your breath or catch a break. Um, that it's really rough to feel balanced and to trust your feelings, because your feelings often can be pretty negative and pretty worried and pretty fearful, and we're just exhausted. Like, oh man, is anybody else exhausted like me? And the whole world is saying, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. This has been rough, and so it's hard to sometimes trust your intuition, which could be saying things to you that, really, you mean I'm supposed to learn something from all this? Really? Like there's a silver lining in all this, really? Even though your intuition could be whispering, yeah, you're actually going to be better through all of this. Yeah, yeah, actually. But it's hard to see that in the moment. So it
Of
feels
course.
like this topic. I'm so happy you're bringing this up, because I think it's time. A lot of people, I believe, are realizing this too, that this is a time to really listen to ourselves.
Yeah.
That we have had our intuitions all through these the last few years, let alone our lifetime. But for whatever reason, we haven't trusted it, or
Mhm.
there's been too much noise and we literally couldn't hear it because there was just too much noise in our mind or whatever. And
Right.
now is the time to listen and act. Yeah.
Well, but it's also, think about the fact, like the social conditioning, the social programming. We've grown up going to school, being literally just
Exactly.
programmed in the head brain. So of course, and
Yes.
that was my journey, right? This is why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I have a direct experience of what happened to me and also for me, of course. But ultimately, I was programmed out of my heart, made wrong for my heart. Literally at 8 years old, my teacher telling me to my face, "You are stupid and you're never going to go anywhere." And me then believing that as an 8-year-old girl, because he's my elder, he's my teacher. Why would he be wrong? Right. And just being made wrong of that intuitive, loving, playful nature that we all have within us, especially as children. And then, what if there's a correlation with the fact that we start to get programmed in the head brain at 6 years old, you know? And from 6 years old up until probably forever for most people, because they don't ever learn about this or reconnect with their intuitive heart and wisdom and trust and self-love and all the above, we continue to feed the head brain to learn only thinking about and focusing our energy on that brain and making it the almighty king, when in fact, the heart is far superior in wisdom, in intelligence and power, and it sends the signals to the head brain. And what I always say is, because I speak to a lot of techie people as well and have corporate workshops for tech companies. So I was like, all right, how do I get through to these people? So I sat and this whole kind of study on the human operating system. And once I kind of understood how an actual computer operates, it made so much sense. And I was able to break it down. And I'm curious about what you feel about this. But when you really break the human operating system down, which now with the dawn of AI is going to be a very important subject, in my opinion, because until we actually reconnect and fully activate the intelligence of the heart, it's very easy for AI to outsmart us. We haven't even reached the full human potential. And here we are already putting all of our energy and time and money into AI, when what are we doing with ourselves? But when we break the human operating system down, or the way that I've really come to understand it, and I'm curious what you feel, the heart is the core processor. The head brain is the hard drive. And the hard drive in a computer, it's only, it operates from memory, right? The body is the motherboard and the spirit is the power cord. So I share this in the Standing Light Method and in my Fifth Element trailer, but the more we focus on really working our hearts out and recentering the mind, which is just consciousness, in the heart brain, we then become really heart-minded. We operate from the source input of the human body, because that's where energy first enters the body, right? Is the heart. And then we also get to start having the conversation again, finally, and not being burnt on the stake for it, of soul and spirit. Because if you think about a computer, we're plugging it into recharge. Where is that electricity coming from? What is, but where are we being powered from? What is that spirit? Where is that energy coming from? And then you go back to Nikola Tesla and, the free energy and all that stuff, or Buckminster Fuller, and you start to kind of understand the whole energy and the toroidal energy fields that we actually could plug into and source our energy from, which is why I developed the standing light method, because it literally is the heart workout that re-plugs you into the free energy field to then source those high vibrational emotions such as love, and you channel them through and into your heart, and you're literally plugged into the most and sourced and being fueled by the two most powerful energies in all of existence through the free energy that's available all around us using the toroidal field. So
I'm sold. Yeah, I love this explanation. It makes a whole lot of sense to me, and I'm tickled, of course, because we've been talking in all the HeartMath years, and from the beginning we were creating similar metaphors, but not all the way that as you've just described it, and I love that, and I think I'm as interested in any as ever in the spirit connection and all this, the connection to the divine that is in us and is a field that we can tap into. Yesterday, I lay out in the sunshine for the first time in months. I've been living near New York City, and it's not the time of year you lie out in the sunshine.
no.
Now I find myself in Texas. It was 75 degrees. I can lie out in the sunshine. Ah, and not just the sun on my skin, but that sense of direct infusion of source energy, and my spirit needing that, let alone my body. And so anyway, I love that, the way you're languaging all this, Layla. I think it's very true. Number one, I think it's very accurate how you're putting it, and very useful, because I think we are more and more just using tech metaphors all the time because we live in a tech world. And to some degree, we will suffocate in that world if we're not careful. Like, do we really need 25 new versions of what our face could look like,
Oh my goodness.
thanks to AI? Like, wow, awesome. Wow, I could look like a Egyptian goddess. I could look like, wow, this is so cool. But to your point, are we even half as excited about what our life could look like when we're not stuck in old negative thinking driven by a mind cut off from the heart, when we're not following the promptings of our heart enough? I'm in this sort of yet another reset in my life. Reset not because there's something bad is happening, but just we kind of all need to reset on a regular basis, whether that's changing your scenery in some cases, or changing your work, or just going for a retreat so that you can shut down what needs to be restored, and so that you can be restored.
When you're restored, that then gives you space to install a higher operating system.
Exactly. And so that's what New Year's resolutions were trying to be, but they kind of got stuck on refrigerator doors.
What?
And they got
Oh
they
God,
got stuck on
the
refrigerator
magnets.
doors and mirrors. I mean, in other words, they didn't really connect truly to one's spirit, one's blueprint, one's ultimate potential.
Mhm.
But I love that way of thinking about it. That um, I believe that each one of us has a very unique blueprint for our life that is unfolding in front of our eyes. And as much as we may think we know what's supposed to happen, I don't think so. I mean, I think some things we have a sense of what's supposed to happen, and we put energy to it, and it happens. So that's sort of proof that that is true. But if the last 3 years has proved anything, it's that the most unpredictable, unexpected things, not all bad, are possible.
Yeah.
And so I think living in the kind of awareness that there is a whole nother dimension of what's going on in humanity and with consciousness and with spirit that is really kind of bigger than all of it.
Mhm.
It's playing out in really chaotic, crazy, challenging, hard, exhausting ways. But then on the other hand, I can be in this moment with you, who I miss because I haven't actually seen you directly
Ditto.
in 3 years or something like that. Is that right? It was June of 2020, I
20,
think it was,
June 2020. Yeah. I came back to New
in New
York
York.
for 2 weeks.
New York, yeah, yeah. So anyhow, I love this thread of what you're perceiving and how you're sharing it. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I would love to close with asking you about the soul and how HeartMath and or how you've kind of through understanding the technology, the science of the heart, would explain and express that from, just you personally, but then also, does HeartMath go there? Do we, if we're talking about soul and spirit, how can we, how could we think about that or integrate that for those that maybe have never even considered that they have a soul or understand what that even really means?
Mm. I'm going to speak for myself now because having not been working inside the organization for some years, a little more than 10 years, I don't know what they might say now and how the philosophy there may have evolved in that regard, but I'm happy to talk. And I think on a personal level, I am more connected to my soul and more honoring of my spirit than at any point in my life. And I'm not like saying I'm the best person around. I'm just saying part of my journey is realizing there are ever deeper levels to go and acknowledging that and thank God we have a soul. I mean, that would be a scary existence if we didn't have a soul, in my opinion. So thank you, God. That was a really good plan to have every human have a soul. And I guess part of it, yeah, exactly. Um, this is another hour and a half podcast to get
We'll
into
have you
this,
back on, don't worry.
actually. Well, yeah, great, excellent. We have to do it in person, however. Just
Okay, those
just
are the
letting you know.
contingencies.
Yeah, yeah. I'll have my people get with your people to iron
Perfect.
out all the details. But I think there is something magical in discovering that we have a soul, and some might call that the Christ consciousness or the God
Buddha.
consciousness or Buddha. I mean, there's all kinds of ways people feel
Interpret.
comfortable in interpreting these things, and I'm very comfortable that I'm a child of God, and everybody else is too, and I have no special claim on that. I'm one of many. A lot of people would not be comfortable hearing me say that or attributing that to themselves either. So I'm fine either way. But I think that there's something, the deeper I look into the nature of life and reality and consciousness, it's just, you hit a certain point, at least I have, where it's like it is so obvious that there is a divine intelligence everywhere. It becomes laughable sometimes. It's like, how many times do I have to see the name Saint Francis show up just when I'm needing some nurturing? I
Mm.
have a particular connection to Saint Francis thanks to my father teaching me the prayer of Saint Francis when I was a small boy.
Mm.
I didn't know the Lord's Prayer. I knew this prayer of St. Francis, which was all about being a peacemaker and about love, not hate, and understanding, not hatred. And it was all about peace and care and love. And so many times in my life, the name St. Francis. I'm driving down the road and there's the St. Francis nursing home. I'm struggling. Why am I in this relationship? And I'm on the streets of New York and like, what's going on? And there's the St. Francis dry cleaners, literally. And like, and then it was like in that moment, it was like, it's all okay. There was a bigger picture going on. And why am I relating all this to the soul and spirit? Because I believe there is this kind of magical divine intelligence that is embodied in a soul that we each have, that gets to learn and grow through life, through our lives, and through all the experiences that we have. And the soul, I believe, is evolving. It's not just a static thing.
No.
And so it's very involved in picking things for our growth that are often like, really? That I need to learn, I need to go through that to learn. Okay. But that's a soul in there that's looking out for us, in my view, how I've come to look at things. And the heart's all part of that,
Right.
obviously, because the heart contains these blueprints of how to live more effectively and how to live more happily and more in loving each other and sharing with each other and all those things. So and I also believe that the more we're kind of in touch with, there is a higher intelligence all the time that we can tap into. That before long we start to realize, oh, I can live in that river as much as I want to, and I can be out of it. If I'm out of it, it's gonna be a whirlpool, and I'm
Mm.
gonna get stuck in the current if I'm not careful. Or I can live in it and try to come back to it, and then you get younger, and then you're more alive because there aren't the impediments in the way, there aren't the obstacles in the way. So your soul is like, yes, go, go, keep going, keep going. Not frantic, not crazy running in through life, but just in the
Oh,
river.
flowing.
Uh, yeah, flowing, exactly. So those are some thoughts on the soul and the spirit.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I couldn't agree more. And when you really start doing that inner work, which so many are on, especially now with this whole self-development trend, right? Everyone's doing the inner work. And I always say that ultimately what that means is really recentering and coming home into your heart, which so many cultures and traditions say that is the heart, is the home of our soul. And
Right.
I've had direct experiences with this, and I'll share this to close, to give my reflection, then close it off. But I've done a lot of past life regression, hypnotherapy, regression work. And it was incredible how I think I do know I'm an extremely old soul. And so I've, from a very young age, had even memories of past lives or things like that. But through hypnotherapy, I was able to actually access my soul consciousness, or go into the Akasha, which is, in a sense, we talk about the Akashic records, which are the records of all the different lifetimes your soul has lived. And I've really come to understand and believe and experience it myself, that right here and right now, if we go deep enough in a hypnotic, like if we go into a subconscious state, we can really actually use our soul to travel and retrieve certain memories from other lifetimes. And that's how some of my most profound healings have taken place. Because I had like an emotional eating disorder from 6 years old until around 26 or so. And I wasn't able to kick it until I understood the source of it, which happened to be in my most recent past life. And I'll do a podcast all about this another time, but I feel that, the more we start talking about this as well, which I feel like is very vital, especially with the dawn of AI, because if we don't re-acknowledge the soul and or spirit, that's what's going to, in a sense, delete natural human beings and override, because that is the one part of us that you cannot outsmart. If you have a soul that's operating from lifetimes of information and experiences, and we reconnect consciously with that part of us and we anchor it in our heart, which in some sense I don't know, this is where I'm like, where my mind has just been like geeking out and just like studying and writing my book on. But I really have come to feel and believe that it's so vital for us as natural human beings now in this very moment with the dawn of AI to really make a conscious attempt to not only connect with our hearts, but ultimately re-anchor our soul within our hearts, because that's where we then can source that higher intelligence and that operate from that higher trust and connection ultimately. So I'll do another podcast all about this and all my past life experiences and go all witchy on you guys, but
make sure I'm invited to that one. I can't wait.
Absolutely.
I think
But
it'd be fascinating to discuss why is it even called artificial intelligence?
okay, let's just add
That's a
that.
whole
Let's
that's a
add
whole
that.
topic in
It
itself.
is. Yeah, because right, we are now at the edge where we are going to have to make a decision on whether we want to keep our natural intelligence or implement artificial intelligence into our bodies. But if we haven't even downloaded or reconnected or plugged into our soul intelligence,
Right.
like what on
Right.
earth are you thinking plugging some other kind of device into you to become, intelligent? It's just, anyway. So this is a very important topic that needs to be discussed. And yeah, I think let's bring you back and geek out on that and go supernova, superhuman.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
have the potential to go superhuman naturally through
Yeah,
our
exactly.
own human natural technology, and let the artificial technology work with us and for us rather than take over.
Yeah. I'm glad I have titanium hips. I wouldn't be walking and dancing and swimming without them.
Yes.
But I'm not about to have everything become artificial.
Mm-hmm.
It just in the name of being able to track or design or something else. My heart, my heart's the most important part of my body by far, and that means a lot of things. There's a lot to do to protect the heart, as you know. But yeah, I think there's a limit, and we're getting there if we're not careful of how far it's even smart to go with some of the technology. Just because we can do it doesn't mean it's good for humanity.
Right.
And just because it's possible doesn't mean it's the next evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Because what about the next evolution of us? What's actually happening in the human body as we speak is so sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
and yet people want to design new apps so we can create cool avatars. Okay, cool, fun. That's fun. I'm an artist. I like having fun new ways to create art, but that's not going to distract me for long away from the real challenge of the ultimate unfoldment of my soul and spirit in service to others and this planet. So the heart.
The heart. May we all come back and anchor in that space and live from that place. And, you said protect the heart, which, yes. And more importantly, get to a place where you can actually project it. Because when we project the power of our heart, we already live in that expanded electromagnetic field, which is our natural force field that will it's naturally designed to protect us, because when we've expanded it, it's like a natural shield of love, of supercharged positive vibrations and energies. Like anything that's lower vibrational is just going to be bounced back off of it, right?
I want what she's having.
Well, come and do the standing
It's
light
awesome.
method.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you so much,
Oh my
Layla.
gosh, thank you.
You're amazing and beautiful, and I love the connection every time we connect.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your intelligence, your time with us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll definitely have you back on so we can geek out even more and maybe do a round of questions as well. If anybody has, you can send them to @standinglight podcast on Instagram. And as soon as we probably have like 10 or more, we'll get you back on and we'll do a Q&A of all things heart. So thank you so much, Bruce. It's been a pleasure. From my heart to yours, I'm sending you a wave of love. And until next time.
Back at you. Love you.
Love you.